my name is Taylor Keys. I'm a program director at Texan by Nature. We're a conservation nonprofit that exists to advance conservation in Texas. And today I'm going to be talking to you about Lights Out Texas, which is a statewide initiative to protect migratory birds that fly across our state. You may be wondering what Lights Out Texas is. It's a campaign of education, awareness, and action that focuses on turning lights out at night for migratory birds during the spring and fall when they migrate across Texas. Each year, billions of birds migrate across our state, flying over annually again in the spring and the fall. The goals of this campaign are to increase statewide participation, the initiative Lights Out Texas at the business, local official, municipal, and community levels, reduce migratory bird mortality overall by turning out lights at night, and coordinate local volunteer efforts to collect and report data on the efforts that are taking place. There are many Lights Out Texas partners across the state that contribute to the coordination and volunteer efforts of the campaign itself. Texan by Nature in Audubon, Texas leads statewide efforts, and there's many partners that have helped found to coordinate Lights Out Texas at a statewide level as well, which include the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, Texas A&M University, which collects the specimens that are coming in from volunteer efforts across the state, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, who helped develop the iNaturalist app for Lights Out Texas, where the volunteers track their efforts, and then many partners across the state like Houston Audubon, Texas Conservation Alliance, the Pro Museum of Nature and Science, and some other partners that help with data sets and whatnot. There's many organizations across the state that, again, participate in volunteer efforts or support the Lights Out Texas efforts, such as various cities, sustainability offices, and other conservation NGOs as well. So here you can see a long list. I'm not going to read through them, but partners in Austin, DFW, Houston and the Gulf Coast, San Antonio, West Texas, and some partners that are statewide, national in scope as well. The partners that are supporting Lights Out Texas that are highlighted in blue are ones that have issued proclamations or resolutions for their cities to participate in Lights Out Texas, which is fantastic, and we hope to see more of this across the state. In 2021, Texan Nature collaborated with all of these organizations and many others across the state to facilitate Lights Out Texas at the statewide level. Prior to been just localized in various cities across Texas. So we worked with all of these organizations to standardize the approach to messaging, communication, and volunteer efforts across the state. And moving forward, the mission of Lights Out Texas will remain the same, and the vision is for all Texans, homeowners and businesses alike, to participate in Lights Out Texas all year long and for it to become a standard and widely accepted best practice. And Texan by Nature will be co-facilitating Lights Out Texas this spring with Audubon, Texas, which we're super excited about. And given the mission, vision, and growth of Audubon, Texas, Lights Out Texas will reach new levels of success with their leadership. And after the spring 2022 season, Lights Out Texas will fully transition from Texan by Nature leadership to Audubon, Texas for that statewide facilitation. And we expect this leadership transition to be seamless and for Lights Out Texas initiative to grow and thrive under Audubon, Texas's vision. How did Lights Out Texas start? This is something you may be wondering as well. And it actually started in Houston, Texas with Houston Audubon. And there was a large collision event in Galveston at the National Insurance Company building, where 400 birds strike the building with a large fatality event, and Houston Audubon worked with that company to implement best lighting practices at their building. So you can see the before and after picture on the right. And that was back in 2017. And after those successful efforts, Lights Out Texas was modeled in Dallas in 2020 with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, Texas Conservation Alliance, the Pro Museum of Nature and Science, the Dallas Zoo, and Texan by Nature. And they created a very successful model in Dallas. And Texas Conservation Alliance has a pledge for Lights Out Texas as well, which is great. And then, as mentioned in 2021, we collaborated with all of these groups to create a statewide Lights Out Texas campaign with, again, that standardized messaging, toolkits, communication, and volunteer efforts. So everyone was using a consistent message across the state. And why are we doing this work and why are birds important? So Texas is globally important for birds. 1 out of every 3 birds migrating through the US in the spring and 1 out of every 4 in the fall passes through Texas. And that's about a billion birds passing through our state, which is just an amazing feat. And protecting birds in Texas promotes conservation of bird populations across the Americas, which is super important with all these birds passing through. And as you may know, birds provide many ecosystem services, act as benchmarks for environmental health, increase the livability of, where we live across the state and in our urban centers, and they connect all people of all ages and all abilities to the natural world. So many people may get into conservation or hiking or the outdoors through bird watching or a love for birds. And birds also contribute to the local economy as well. You can see a study featured here where nature tourism just in the Rio Grande Valley alone contributed over 300 million. And that's just one small area. So I know folks go birding all across our state. And if you didn't know, most birds in North America are migratory, and of those, 80% migrate at night, which is something big education point for the general public. This is something that they don't know, and oftentimes people ask us, so why do we have to turn off birds at night? I thought birds migrated or were out about during the day, but yeah, so 80% migrate at night, and this is why we're turning out lights at night to protect those birds that are migrating so they can make their journey across North America and through Texas, both in the spring and the fall. And at night, there are many dangers to birds that are flying through the sky. So we're focusing again on residences, buildings, things like that. In this graphic, you can see how many mortalities and collisions from these various structures contribute to those bird fatalities. So again, targeting those buildings and residences to turn out lights at night for those migratory birds. And in Texas, I'm not sure what the exact stats are now, but the last time I checked is that Texas contains 3 of the top 20 US cities for exposing migrating birds to hazards created by light pollution. So Houston, Dallas are up there, along with our other cities that have large urban centers with bright lights. And again, most of these migratory birds migrate at night. So these buildings can distract and disorient birds, leaving the birds vulnerable. So oftentimes this light will reflect with glass that are on some of these tall buildings and can show reflections of trees, which are not actually there. And that can cause collisions, which we do not want. And here you can see a map of Texas with light pollution. And this is a visualization provided by Tim Wallace from the Cornell lab. And just want to highlight some of the latest research as well. So a paper has found that birds migrating at night and turning out these lights is reducing collisions overall, which is fantastic. And even turning off, individual lights is meaningful as well. So, part of this campaign is sharing the latest research and working with our partners across Texas to understand, what is the impact that turning out lights at night having, and really highlighting the business case for turning out lights, which is saving energy, saving birds, and just, making the Texas skies dark for everyone to enjoy. And briefly mention energy, but as you can likely infer that turning out lights at night also saves energy as well. So as we're working with businesses and other folks that have large buildings and structures that are lit up, this is something that is always great to talk about to get folks to buy in. Is not only are they saving birds at night, but also saving energy, which is cost savings for them. So this is definitely a plus for a lot of the cities and buildings that have been buying in as well. And you may be wondering when exactly birds are migrating through Texas. So we're actually in spring migration right now. So spring migration lasts from March 1st to June 15th, and the peak migration is April 22nd to May 12th. So just in a few weeks, we'll be starting peak migration, and that is when 1 out of every 3 birds migrating through the US will be passing through Texas. And that 22nd to May 12th date, that's the critical spring peak migration period where 50% of those birds will be migrating. And then a wider period of April 14th through May 22nd will be 75% of all those birds migrating in spring. So super important to spread the message and get folks to turn out lights during this period. And then there's barely any time between spring and fall, but birds will begin migrating through Texas in the fall, going to their overwintering grounds August 15th through November 30th, with the peak migration being roughly around September 5th through October 29th. And again, 1 out of every 4 birds will be migrating during the fall. And this equates to about 1 billion birds traveling through our state every year. And we'll have some more definite fall dates a little bit later in the year. We work with Cornell Lab of Ornithology to determine those. And this lab is from one of their colleagues, Horton, out of Colorado State University. And here's just a visualization of when the average peak migration dates are for the spring for birds migrating across the United States. And what we're asking people to do, and how we're telling folks to get involved in Lights Out Texas, is really turning out those non-essential lights from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. each night during migration season. So being mindful of there are some security lighting and things like that where people, or emergency lighting that can't be turned out. So just focusing on those non-essential lights, encouraging folks not to use landscape lighting where possible, and or dimming those lights or not using them at all. And then for those essential lights like security and emergency lighting, using dark sky friendly lighting practices is super important. So aiming those lights down, using lighting shields so the light isn't emanating above the horizontal plane, using motion detectors and sensors so lights are really only on when folks need them, and closing blinds whether you're in your own home or a big building. So if you do need to use light at night, it's not a lot of light emanating out of the windows. And then for folks that do own or manage buildings, really considering working with those custodial crew or just staff members that are in the office at the end of the day to schedule lights and or turn out lights at 11 p.m. or just whenever they're done working. I know a lot of large buildings program their lighting, so just programming that lighting to set to turn off at 11 p.m. and turn back on at 6 a.m. or whenever the first person's in there. And this is something that you can really schedule and leave all year long, and no need to go, change it during migration season. It really is a best practice that can be implemented to not only, again, save energy and money, but birds and just other wildlife all year long. And as we're promoting Lights Out Texas and sharing this with our networks, and getting involved, please, share your success on social media. We want to highlight those doing the great work for others to learn from and recreate. And for buildings that are taller than 3 stories, there are some additional guidelines. All of this is on our website, which I'll share in a bit, but for some of that decorative lighting, spot lighting, logos, things like that, just asking folks if they can extinguish or dim those, if there's lobbies or atriums, turning those off as well. And again, using those motion sensors wherever possible. Things to avoid: floodlights, illuminating plants or things like that birds be able to see from the exterior. We don't want them to think that they can, fly into those areas where there may be indoor plants and collide with the glass. And again, working with those cleaning crews to get lights out. And then if possible, again, using those dark sky friendly lighting practices, one of which is using warmer color temperature lights, so avoiding those blue rich lights as well. And then just trying to use desk lamps and overhead lightings or blinking lights. And again, just shutting those blinds as well in some of those large buildings will help a lot. And then there's lots of additional ways birds can be friendly if folks are curious, besides just going lights out at night, which is the goal of this campaign. But the American Bird Conservancy has some really great resources on how to make some of that glass in the buildings that can be highly reflective, more friendly towards birds. They have a downloadable resource guide for bird-friendly buildings, so please check that out. And some of our conservation partners across the state, like the Hill Country Alliance and McDonald Observatory, and the International Dark Sky Association have some great resource on dark sky friendly lighting as well. So be sure to check those out. And then as mentioned, would love for folks to share what they're doing as far as going lights out for migratory birds. So the Texas Conservation Alliance has a pledge where you can show your commitment to go lights out. It's tcatexas.org/lightsouttexas. Their certification is called Lights Out for Wildlife. So you can take the pledge and get a little certificate there. So we encourage whether you're a homeowner, landowner, business to go take the pledge. And again, share your successes on social media. Let us know, shoot us an email about what you're doing. We want to recognize your efforts. We can also recognize efforts through TextNature as well through our certification program. So we have a simple free Google form on our website where you tell us about what you're doing, add some photos, tell us about your impact, and we do a write-up on our website and social media channels. So again, want to highlight those best practices for others to learn from and recreate and really use that Texas mentality of I want to be the biggest and the best, and encourages competition of good practices for all Texans. You can also see when birds are migrating through Texas through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Birdcast software, which is super great. So they'll actually send out alerts, and you can subscribe for these alerts as well and get a notification that says, bird migration in my area is high. So you can visit their site just at birdcast.info and find all of the tools and software there. Again, they use weather forecast software to determine these bird migration events, but super neat to see when they're migrating in your area, and also great to use on social media or just newsletters to let folks in your network know, like, hey, bird, a lot of birds are migrating through our area tonight. Remember to turn out your lights at night from 11 p.m. To 6 a.m. to make sure we're protecting the birds that are flying through. And again, you can find all of this at birdcast.info. They have migration tools where you can see visualizations of the migration patterns. You can sign up for those migration alerts as well. And I mentioned early on volunteer efforts. So this is something that is going on across Texas. You'll see some images click through that are from the Dallas team that's volunteering, and volunteers are out across Texas collecting these birds that collide with buildings so we can better understand the migration dynamics and how light pollution is affecting these birds that are flying across the state. And those birds are collected and sent to the Biodiversity Research and Teaching Collection at Texas A&M University, and that's in their Department of Ecology and Conservation Biology. And they process those specimens. I work with students to do that, and they prepare them as museum collections, which are used by the university or other folks across the state, various other museums, and they collect a lot of data on them, various tissue samples and stuff like that to see if there's any trends. And again, folks across Texas are doing these volunteer efforts, so if you're interested in getting involved, that's a great place to start as well, in addition to sharing the Lights Out Texas message with your networks. But in Austin, Travis Audubon is leading those efforts. In Dallas, the Texas Conservation Alliance and Perot Museum are leading those efforts. Houston Audubon, San Antonio, the Bear Audubon Society, and there's some folks coordinating various volunteer efforts in West Texas as well, which is the Big Bend Conservation Alliance and the University of Texas at El Paso. And those volunteers document those collisions and fatalities in iNaturalist, so you can see excuse me, the types of birds that they're finding there. And those are all documented across the state. So you can see where those birds are being collected, those major cities again, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, Houston, and West Texas. I did want to highlight as well the success that we had in 2021. In spring, had a great season, a lot of press and a lot of cities getting on board: Arlington, Cedar Hill, Dallas, Dripping Springs, Fort Worth, Galveston, Houston, Travis County. They all made Lights Out Texas proclamations, which is fantastic, and would like to see this for all cities across Texas, and lots of businesses made proclamations as well. And then the volunteers who I mentioned in spring, there was 170 volunteers that contributed over 1,200 volunteer hours to collect those birds. And you've likely seen Lights Out Texas on social media as well. And in the spring, they're from what we're able to count, which is an underestimate, the 62 posts that we saw received over 195 million impressions, which is just great, and reached over 7.5 million accounts. In the fall, we saw lots more success as well with the campaign. So Dallas, Fort Worth, Travis County made lights out proclamations. Travis County actually made excuse me, their resolution into perpetuity, which is great. And then again, we had lots of businesses going lights out across Texas, and over 130 volunteers contributed 900 plus hours and documented 490 plus bird casualties in cities across Texas. And then again, we had lots of Lights Out Texas social media posts receiving millions and millions of impressions and being shared across many accounts. So we're excited to continue the success into spring of 2022. And then part of Lights Out Texas and just the facilitation of the statewide campaign, we do put together reports at the end of every season. So you can check those out on our website. Again, I'll share that at the end of the presentation, but we put together reports for each season as well as an end of year report as well. So I wanted to highlight the pledges and commitments from 2021. So 111 businesses confirmed participation in Lights Out Texas in the spring, 92 in the fall, and then we had almost 1,200 pledges in 2021 as well, coming from the Texas Conservation Alliance and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And here's just a snapshot of volunteer efforts as well, which I mentioned. So over 2,000 volunteers contributed in 2021, which is very impressive. So these folks are out very early in the morning documenting birds and picking them up. Also wanted to share this snapshot from the Lights Out Dallas team. And you can just see this is a snapshot of the birds they collected in fall 2020 and 2021. So you can see all of the species that are being impacted. And this is just Dallas that are colliding with the downtown buildings. And as mentioned, you can find everything that you need for Lights Out Texas on our website, which is texnature.org. And you can find that by going there and then clicking on, there's a partners tab at the top, which will drop down and you can click on Lights Out Texas. And there we have all the guidelines for how to get involved. This is a great resource to link people to. We have resources, which I'll show you here. So toolkits for social media, easy copy and paste content that you can copy right into Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, things like that, upload the graphics that come with it, and share Lights Out Texas with your networks. We have that toolkit also in Spanish, so trying to promote it that way you can as well. We also have an outreach toolkit, so if you're wanting to email folks about Lights Out Texas, we have copy and paste templates for that as well. With an accompanying letter from Joni Carswell, Texan Nature CEO, and Lisa Gonzalez, the CEO of Audubon, Texas. We also have a press kit. There's FAQs linked. We have those dark sky friendly lighting practices linked as well. And those reports that I mentioned for spring and fall in the 2021 summary report are linked. And if you're wanting, if you have questions about Lights Out Texas, or if you want to plug in with a city, somewhere across Texas and volunteer, or you want to know how you can get involved, or you want to share with us what you're doing, just contact us. Happy to talk to you. We're here to help you in any way that we can participate in Lights Out Texas. You can contact us at info@texanbynature.org. And just remember to turn out those lights at night for migratory birds from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. during the migration season, which is March 1st through June 15th. So we hope you'll join us in turning lights out at night for migratory birds. Thank you for your time.